Aloha, welcome to the board meeting. This is Robert with Blue Planet Surf, and with me is...
I'm Evan from StandUpPaddleSurf.net, and today we're in the back of Blue Planet Surf as usual. There's no air conditioning here currently, so please forgive us as you see sweat dripping down my face, but
yeah.
Anyways.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about leashes.
Leashes.
So we also recently made a video on how to choose a leash, but we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of leashes. And what works for what kind of conditions. And
so I was kind of thinking about this from the video that you guys made on like how to choose a leash, but a lot of that's like the length and so on.
Yeah.
This one I was wondering, like, when do you wear a calf leash versus wearing an ankle leash? That's the thing. And since you've been around this for a long time, then do you even remember when these things came out?
Well, calf leashes have been around for a long time. Yeah, I mean, since probably before I was born. So, but
that long?
Yeah, I think even since the leashes started, some people put them on their ankle, some people put them on their calf.
Huh.
So especially for longboarding, I guess they've been popular because when you cross step like up to the front of the board and back and so on, it kind of keeps the leash a little bit away from your feet, so it's less likely to step on it. And I used to have a calf leash for like racing with a coil leash, just to keep the coil more off the board and to keep from stepping on it also. But I found for me it was kind of not really that much of an advantage to have the calf leash, especially kind of because a lot of times and then also when you're surfing, when I try to stand up surfing, I find a lot of times you put the paddle behind you when you do a cutback or whatever. And then when you bring the paddle back, the leash being up higher, your paddle tends to catch the leash actually easier, So with your paddle, you tend to tangle up in the leash more. And then another problem with the calf, like this is a calf leash here. It's basically just a bigger opening here where that you can put under your knee right here.
Well, you can see it.
Yeah, I'll put it on.
Show your super hairy legs. So lift it up, you can see in the camera.
My monkey legs right here.
Yeah.
So this is where you put a calf leash versus an ankle leash. Obviously goes on the ankle.
Okay, I'll do an ankle.
Yeah. Okay. So. All right. But so yeah, I mean, so it has some advantages in terms of like for longboarding and so on. What I find too is like especially the stand-up boards create a lot more pull on the leash, because they're so big, and when the wave hits it, it just kind of pulls even harder, right? So and the problem if you have your leash on your calf, if it pulls hard and you just got a straight leg, it can actually pull it down your leg, and then this is it'll slide right over your ankle. It can come right off your leg. So kind of what you have to do is kind of bend your knee a little bit to hold the leash almost, and in the bigger wave, it actually puts a lot of strain on your knees, So instead of just like letting your leg get pulled out straight, I find it puts more strain on your knees, and I don't.
So you don't use it.
In waves, I don't like to use it for that reason, because I like to just let my leg pull straight on the ankle, and it feels more secure,
Yeah.
In small waves, I guess you could use it. I just personally, after
don't fall.
Trying both, I just prefer ankle leashes, So I don't really use calf leashes anymore. But I know some people like to use it for racing, where it kind of makes sense, because it keeps it off the deck and maybe a little bit out of your way if you're moving around up and down on the board on downwinders.
I think for racing, I like to use just a kind of a small coil, and then calf leash or ankle is okay because it keeps it all out of the water. But if I'm going to be falling and stuff, I don't want to be using this coil leash because it's going to get all tangled funny and it wraps around things and it's hard to get off. Like if it wraps around your fin and then you try to get it off the fin after, I mean, you got to get off your board and do it. You don't really want to be doing that in like surf. That's kind of lame.
Yeah, I mean, basically anyone that's tried a coil leash in surf and real surf will attest.
You're going to get rid of it. You're not going to use it.
It doesn't work well for surfing.
This is good for cruising.
Yeah, for cruising. If you're only paddling flat water or racing downwinders, you don't want the leash dragging behind you. Leashes do create a lot of extra drag. So in a race situation, definitely a coil leash, because the drag of a regular leash is even though it might not be much over an hour race, that can add enough drag to make you a few seconds slower anyways, and that's maybe all it takes to be one or two places more forward. But yeah, that said, on the coil leashes, especially if you're usually the guideline is to have a leash that's as long as your board, at least, you know, because for safety, you know, you don't want that thing snapping back at you. Like if you're falling in the wave and you got a 10-foot board and the leash is 8 feet,
but you know what else?
It's going to come right back at you, you know?
I put a shorter leash on one of my boards because I thought, oh, it's shorter, so it's easier to pull it back in the water afterwards.
It is.
And what happened is, you know, you go over the wave and then you just kind of jump off sometimes. You know, you're going up and the thing breaks on you and you kind of jump over.
Right.
I did that move on a shorter leash, and then my ankle got yanked,
backwards.
and then I railed my knee right onto the front of the board. I actually dinged the front of the board with my shin and knee area, and then had like glass and stuff stuck in my knee. After that, I said, you know what, forget it on the shorter leashes. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you're riding a shorter board, like a 9-foot board or 8.6 or something like that, I would say, yeah, then you can use an 8-foot leash. But yeah, on a 10-foot or 10.6, you don't want to use an 8-foot.
But if you ever do that kind of thing where you go up the wave and you do that little jump over, you know, like when you hit the top and you kind of jump over, if you're right at the front of the board and your leash is short, dude, you're hitting that board with your leg, or your head or something.
Definitely, yeah. So, but for the, like, I was going to say the one exception to that rule is kind of on race boards, where you want the leash to be tight. You know, like a coil leash, you don't want it to be flopping around, because then that defeats the purpose. If the leash is like flopping around and dragging in the water on the side of the board, then you actually creating even more drag than with a regular leash, because the coil kind of creates more drag. So you don't want a leash that's loose on the board. You want it to be kind of taut. So usually for race boards, like I'll use like an 8 or 10-foot length coil leash on a 14-foot or 18-foot board. You know, like on a 14-foot board, I often just use an 8-foot long coil leash, just so it's tight. And then over time, you know, after it stretches out a bunch, and if you get worked by a few big waves, that coil leash, you know, like when it's new, it has kind of a tight coil. Over time, it definitely gets looser and looser. You know, so. You know, eventually
8 foot becomes like 12 feet.
Yeah, you might have to replace it at some point when it's all like the coils are basically no longer pulling the leash tight.
But that's only happening if you fall. So if you're on the race board and you're not falling a lot, and it can stay on the deck of your board, then that's cool. If you're going to be falling a lot, then this is not really cool, because it gets in the way.
But you know how it is like coming in at Kaimana every night on the big south swell.
But that's not like a lot, you know what I mean? I'm talking about like 10, 15 times or something, you know.
Yeah, but if you're paddling all summer, even if you just get worked by 3 big waves, that's enough to kind of stretch out your coil. The pull of a 14-foot board or an 18-foot board on, you know, get a big ball of white water. One wave can be enough to kind of mess up your coil, you know.
Well, that and then it could wrap around your board, and then, especially if your board is hollow.
Yeah. And also, you know, in those kind of conditions, if you do think there might be waves, like I've made the mistake before of attaching the leash in the middle of the board.
That's how you break it in half.
Yeah, to reduce the amount of drag or whatever. And I see people do that in races, which is it's fine in flat water races or where you're not expecting any waves. But if there's a chance that your board's going to get caught by a wave, that's what happens. Basically, you know, you instead of turning with the wave when the wave's coming, the board turns sideways, and basically the wave
wraps around
T-boned, and then it'll just put a lot of pressure on your board and can break it in half. So you don't want to do that. Don't want to put your leash in the middle of the board.
Yeah, that's a bad move.
Yeah.
You know what I also found on these calf leashes? I like it if it's just kind of cruise conditions and you're not going to fall a lot.
Right.
Because the thing you notice immediately is once you fall and you get back on, if you spend any time in your knees, this is uncomfortable.
Right.
It digs into your leg and it's super uncomfortable.
Yeah,
so if you're spending time on your knees at all and stuff, you really don't want to be using this calf leash. It gets in the way.
Right. Agreed. Yeah, I think for stand-ups, I usually recommend just getting an ankle leash. That's what I prefer personally. Easier. But you know, it's a matter of preference, and I know some people like it. You know, so. But I would recommend, you know, if you're not sure, just go with an ankle leash. It's a safe bet.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and for longboarding though, then the calf leash makes sense.
Yeah, if they're walking the board a lot or something, you're awesome. Then okay, great.
Yeah, although you still have to watch out not to catch your paddle when you kind of have the paddle behind you coming back. It can kind of catch that leash more easily.
But then, you know, as you progress, there's like a million different situations and scenarios. So who knows? If you like it, get it.
Right.
But I kind of like I like the calf leash if I'm not going to fall. And this ankle one for pretty much everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So you want to talk a little bit about the thickness of the leash too? I mean, basically, one thing about stand-up is that it puts a lot more, basically it puts a lot more power onto the leash. Basically, you know, because it's a bigger board, will have more pull on the leg, and you know, if you have to bail in front of a big wave, dive down, that leash takes a lot of pressure. You know, so you know, and leashes will break. And they always break at basically the weakest link, you know. So wherever the weakest link is, they're gonna break. Generally speaking, you want like you know, want a thicker diameter leash. Like this one, for example, is 8 millimeters thick.
So this one's thinner.
Yeah, this is a thinner one. This is 7 millimeters. So you know, there's definitely a difference. You know, that one extra millimeter makes it quite a bit stronger. And then you know, also the connections. Like you can see, the 7 millimeter kind of has a smaller connection here. So and you know, so wherever the weakest link is that's where the leash is going to break. So
is there a lot less drag or something on the skinny one? Is that the deal?
A little bit less drag, you know, and it's lighter weight and so on, you know. So if you're using it in smaller waves, you can go with a thinner leash, you know, and it's less expensive too. But when you're using it in any size wave,
like $2 or something. I mean,
yeah, right. So you know, if you're going to be using it in waves, always go with a thicker, stronger leash or whatever. I mean, we even have like the double XL hand-tied leashes. That's, you know, for, you know, North Shore kind of conditions. You know, and it's not worth it to lose a board and have it go into the rocks because your leash breaks. You know, and plus you have to swim after it. You might lose your session. You might not have an extra leash in your car. So you know, like I would say, you know, go with the thicker, stronger, better leash if in doubt. You know. And
then how often are you changing out leashes? Because I just had one break, but I think it's been on that board for a long time. You know, years.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the urethane breaks down, and especially with UV light.
Maybe
you know?
every year or something.
If you leave it in the sun, you know, I would say at least once a year you should replace it. If you don't use it that much, and if it's like in the shade, or you know, and you know, they can last like 2 years easily. But you know, 2-3 years, I would say, is the max you want to use a leash. Then after that, it just becomes brittle, you know, and the rubber will break.
Into a dog thing.
Yeah, or whatever you want to do with it.
Dog leash.
And sometimes you can reuse some of the parts too. Like it's pretty easy to take these. There's like a little screw here at the end. You can just use a FCS key and unscrew the parts.
I know, but what you're going to use that for if your leash part is broken? I mean, just buy another one.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's like $20.
Yeah, I always kind of keep the like if the leash breaks, I'll keep the cuff and this part, and then if something else breaks, then I'll use that part. But I don't know. At a shop, we have a lot of these parts flying around.
Are you Chinese? It's like pocket action. You shit, taking everything. I mean, what's going on around here? It sounds like something I would be doing, you know. Like
I'm supposed to be selling it,
saving, save, and then resell it. Discount.
Get some used leashes.
There you go.
Well, we have a lot of rental boards too, and people always mess up the leashes.
That's true. It makes sense in here.
Another common thing that we see a lot is people, you know, jumping in the water with like a little knot in the leash, and like not making sure it's all straight before they attach it to their feet. So if there's a knot, I mean, you know, and it might be just like a loose, you know, like a loose tangled up, but there's a knot, and then once it gets pulled tight, that knot on the leash, it's like impossible to get out. You know? So that happens a lot with our rental boards. People come back, it's like, oh, I didn't realize there was, you know, they come back with a knot in it, and it's like, oh, I didn't do that, you know. So, but once it's pulled tight by a wave, you're never going to get that thing out again. So we have like.
Can you just leave it as a knot then? Will it make it weak or whatever?
Do you want me to get one and show what it looks like? So this is kind of what happens when, you know, I couldn't find the leash that had a knot in it, but this one had a knot, and we kind of took it back out. And as you can see, it's like really tweaked the urethane. So if there's a lot of pull on that leash, pretty obvious where it's going to break, right?
Yeah, that thing's goners, man.
Yeah.
But can you just still use it if it has that big knot?
Yeah, you can use a leash with a knot in it, but the problem is that
it might be weak.
Yeah, it's because of
curved and stuff.
You know, the tighter it pulls, the thinner it pulls the urethane, and then it does weaken the leash.
That's the ones you give to like your younger brother.
Old leashes with knots is not a good idea. So always make sure you straighten that leash before you attach it to your ankle. You know. Yeah, and then you know. The coil leash too, another issue is when you fall off, and like that happens a lot when I do downwind coaching. First time people, they always like, you know, you fall in and you swim around the tail of the board, you get back on, and then the leash is like tangled around the fin or tangled around the tail.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And then you're dragging it behind you, you know. So that's something like before you get back on.
The coil one that happens a lot.
You want to make sure that, you know, especially if you're swimming around the tail or you're coming around the other side, to make sure that the leash is on top of the board and not underneath it. You know, that it doesn't tangle around the tail, because that, you know, having a leash wrapped around your fin, that causes a lot of extra drag and it'll slow you down, you know. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, that's a pretty long discussion on leashes. So I don't know. Hopefully you made it to the end of this thing. And
we can always make it shorter, right? So.
Now just put it up, and if you want to turn off part way through, then that's how it goes. But so, anyways, thanks for watching today. This was Board Meeting here at Blue Planet Surf, and please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe down below, and we'll check you out next time for another board meeting. Aloha.
Thanks for watching. Aloha.